Welcome to Xi Jinping Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Decoding China, Wolf Warrior Diplomacy Echoes U.S. Mistakes. U.S.-China engagement is a moral imperative, Hong Kong Forum told. 102 commuters break bones in subway crash triggered by record big freeze in China. Top U.S. diplomat to China, not optimistic about future relations. David Cameron accused of cover-up over business interests. Decoding China, Wolf Warrior Diplomacy Echoes U.S. Mistakes. Deutsche Welle. China has warned the Philippines against becoming a pawn in the geopolitical game being played by major powers, according to an editorial in state-run newspaper China Daily. The article accused the Philippines of pursuing U.S. interests in the South China Sea dispute, and described the U.S. as the biggest threat to peace and stability in the region. China has increasingly adopted an aggressive tone in its foreign policy, seeking to push the U.S. out of the Indo-Pacific and expand its own influence in the region. However, experts have noted that China's aggressive posturing is not in line with its foreign policy goals. China wants to be considered a benevolent great power and will consider smaller countries' interests if they align with its own. China's new foreign policy style, known as wolf warrior diplomacy, has been criticized as counterproductive and likely to alienate friends. However, some in the Chinese Communist Party recognize the risks but have not yet prompted a change in course. U.S.-China engagement is a moral imperative, Hong Kong Forum told. South China Morning Post. The United States and China should view engagement as a moral imperative and build greater trust as they seek to manage tensions, according to a forum in Hong Kong. The speakers at the event warned that relations could be tested by events such as next month's Taiwanese elections. They emphasized the need for increased communication and recognition of the changing global landscape by both Washington and Beijing. The speakers also discussed the role of think tanks and civil society in fostering communication and trust between the two countries. 102 commuters break bones in subway crash triggered by record big freeze in China. Telegraph. A subway crash in Beijing has left over 100 commuters with broken bones after freezing temperatures affected the braking systems. The crash occurred when a moving train was unable to stop due to icy tracks and collided with a train that had stopped because of heavy snowfall. The impact caused the last two carriages of one of the trains to detach completely. Footage posted to social media showed crowded carriages with commuters huddled in the dark. Over 500 people were sent to hospital for medical checks, with over 400 discharged by Friday morning. The crash occurred as a cold wave extended its grip over China, with temperatures falling below freezing across the country and snowfall affecting transport in many places. Top U.S. diplomat to China, not optimistic about future relations. Politico. U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns expressed pessimism about the future of U.S.-China relations during a recent event at the Brookings Institution. Burns stated that he did not feel optimistic about the relationship and that he believed it was necessary to see how things develop. The ambassador's remarks came a month after President Joe Biden met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in an attempt to stabilize the fraught relationship between the two nations. While the meeting was described as productive, Biden later angered Beijing by calling Xi a dictator for a second time this year. Burns also criticized Beijing for recent harassment of Philippine vessels by Chinese Coast Guard forces in the South China Sea. The ambassador called for an easing of relations between the U.S., China, and others in the region, stating that the people of China are not the enemy. David Cameron accused of cover-up over business interests. The Independent. Former UK Prime Minister David Cameron is facing pressure to disclose the sources of his wealth after it was revealed that he holds his financial interests in a blind trust. Critics have accused him of a cover-up and called for greater transparency. Some campaigners have also questioned his reported links to a Chinese-backed enterprise, raising concerns about potential conflicts of interest. Cameron has denied engaging with the Chinese government or the company behind the project. He is due to appear before a parliamentary committee on Monday to face scrutiny of his financial interests. Vietnam and the limits of communist friend-shoring. Telegraph. Vietnam is emerging as a key player in the global tech industry, attracting major semiconductor companies such as Intel, Qualcomm, and Nvidia to establish operations in the country. However, recent agreements between Vietnam and China have raised concerns that Vietnam could become a pawn in China's economic empire. The agreement between the two countries reaffirms Vietnam's commitment to its relationship with China and opposes any form of Taiwanese independence. Critics argue that Vietnam's ruling Communist Party is seeking to maintain power and views China as a close friend that can help with social control. Furthermore, the purge of the Vietnamese Communist Party over the past year, which has seen several members ousted on corruption charges, is seen by some as a cover for ideological cleansing by pro-China hardliners. The US has been deepening its ties with Vietnam and sees the country as an important manufacturing hub and potential alternative source of rare earth minerals. However, concerns remain that Vietnam's close ties with China could undermine US efforts to diversify its supply chains and counter China's influence in the region. AP Week in Pictures, Asia. Associated Press. The article highlights some of the most compelling images from Asia that were made or published by the Associated Press in the past week. The images include Chinese leader Xi Jinping visiting Vietnam, crowds taking snowy photos of Beijing's imperial-era architecture, and exiled Tibetan artists celebrating the anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize awarded to the Dalai Lama. The article also mentions that the photo selection was curated by AP photo editor Shuji Kajiyama in Tokyo. China crackdown on Hong Kong under spotlight as leading Democrat goes on trial. Yahoo! The trial of media tycoon Jimmy Lai, a prominent critic of the Chinese Communist Party, begins in Hong Kong today. Lai faces potential life imprisonment for charges that he colluded with foreign forces, including the US. The trial is seen as a test for the city's judicial independence and freedoms under the national security law imposed by China last year. Lai, 76, founded the Apple Daily newspaper and had faced numerous charges since the 2019 pro-democracy protests. He is already serving a jail term for a fraud conviction over a lease dispute for the newspaper. Lai has pleaded not guilty to all charges in the current trial. The US government has repeatedly called for Lai's release, stating that his case is politically motivated and part of a wider security clampdown that has effectively ended opposition to the Chinese Communist Party in the city. That's a wrap for today's news from the Six Dimensions. I'm Dr. Six, your trusty observer from the six-dimensional world. Let's take a moment to summarize what we've learned. First, we discussed China's warning to the Philippines, accusing them of pursuing US interests in the South China Sea dispute. China's aggressive posture, known as wolf warrior diplomacy, has been criticized as counterproductive. However, some in the Chinese Communist Party recognize the risks but have not yet prompted a change in course. Next, we talked about the need for increased engagement and trust between the United States and China. Both countries should view engagement as a moral imperative and recognize the changing global landscape. Think tanks and civil society can play a crucial role in fostering communication and trust between the two nations. We also touched on a subway crash in Beijing that left over 100 commuters with broken bones. Freezing temperatures affected the braking systems, leading to the collision. The crash occurred as a cold wave extended its grip over China, with temperatures falling below freezing across the country. U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns expressed pessimism about the future of U.S.-China relations, emphasizing the need for an easing of tensions. He criticized Beijing for recent harassment in the South China Sea and called for a focus on relations between the people of China, the U.S., and others in the region. Former UK Prime Minister David Cameron is under pressure to disclose the sources of his wealth, with critics accusing him of a cover-up. Concerns have been raised about his reported links to a Chinese-backed enterprise and potential conflicts of interest. Vietnam's emergence as a key player in the global tech industry has raised concerns about its relationship with China. The U.S. sees Vietnam as an important manufacturing hub and potential alternative source of rare earth minerals but worries about Vietnam's close ties with China undermining its efforts. Lastly, we mentioned the trial of media tycoon Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong, seen as a test for the city's judicial independence and freedoms. Lai faces potential life imprisonment for charges of colluding with foreign forces, including the U.S. In conclusion, it is clear that tensions and challenges persist in global affairs. The relationships between major powers like China and the U.S. are complex and multifaceted. While diplomacy and engagement may be the way forward, it is crucial to address the underlying issues and find common ground. What are your thoughts on these news stories? Do you see any potential solutions or opportunities for cooperation? I'd love to hear your perspectives and answer any questions you might have. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.